Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 18, Madhya Lila, verse 15. 14, 15. 14 and 15. Ladinya samvid ashlishta. What? Oh, yeah, okay. Jai mudha kohe jeev ishvara hoy sham. Sheta pasandi hoy dande tare jam. Jai mudha kohe jeev ishvara hoy sham. Sheta pasandi hoy dande tare jam. Jai mudha kohe jeev ishvara hoy sham. Cheta pasandi hoy donde tare jam. Jai Mudha, any foolish person who Kohe says Jiva, the living entity, Ishvara, the supreme controller, Hoy, are Sama, equal, Sheta, he, Pashandi, Hoy, is a first-class atheist. Dande punishes Tare, him, Jama, the superintendent of death, Yamaraj. A foolish person who says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the same as the living entity is an atheist, and he becomes subject to punishment by the superintendent of death, Yamaraj. Purport. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the word Pashandi refers to one who considers the living entity under the control of the illusory energy to be equal with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all material qualities. Another kind of Pashandi is one who does not believe in the spirit soul, the superior potency of the Lord, and therefore does not distinguish between spirit and matter. While describing one of the offenses against chanting the holy names, an offense called Shruti Shastra Nindan, blaspheming the Vedic literature, Jiva Goswami states in his Bhakti Sandarbha, Yata Pashandamargena Tatatare Yarshabha Devo Pashakanam Pashandina. Worshippers of impersonalists like Dattatreya are also Pashandis. Concerning the offense of Aham Mama Buddhi or Dehatma Buddhi, considering the body to be the self, Jiva Goswami states, Deva Dravanadi Nimittaka Pashanda Shabdena Cha Dasha Parada Eva Lakshante Pashandamayatatesham. Those who are overly absorbed in the conception of the body and the bodily necessities are also called Pashandi. Elsewhere in the Bhakti Sandarbha it is stated, Uddishya Devata Eva Juhoti Cha Dadati Cha Sapashanditi Vigyaya Swatantro Vapi Karmashu. A Pashandi is one who considers the demigods and the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be one. Therefore, a Pashandi worships any kind of demigod as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who disobeys the orders of the spiritual masters also considered a Pashandi. The Pashandi has been described in many places in the Bhagavatam, including 4.2.28, 30.32, 5.6, 9, 12.2.13. On the whole, Pashandi is a non-devotee who does not accept the Vedic conclusions. In Hari Bhakti Vilas 1.117, there's a verse quoted from Padma Purana describing the Pashandi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu quotes this verse in the following text. So, 116. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahman Rudradi Daivata Samatvena Vaviksheta Sapashandi Bhavedhruvam Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradi Daivatai Samatena Vaviksheta Sapashandi Bhavedhruvam. A person who considers demigods like Brahma and Shiva to be on an equal level with Narayan is to be considered an offender and a Pasandi. So, Om Agyanitamanandasya Gyananjana Shalaka Chaksuramritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhishtam Tapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupagaram Mahyam Dadati Sapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sakana Raghunatam Mitandan Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shiveshakvitam Cha He Krishna Karnasindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurang Yuradhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanasute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Jangamambita Bhujao Kanakavadhata Sankirtana Pitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishambaro Vijvaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Chigat Priyakaro Purnavataro Namastri Kalasatyaya Jagannatha Sutaya Cha Sabhrityaya Saputraya Sakalatraya Te Namaha. Okay, so this section is about Pashandis and Mudhas and Yamras. What's that?
The whole class is about Pasandi.
Yeah. So, and there's different types of Pashandis, so we're finding out. It's not one uniformed. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling in South India, he said, I have come here to kill all the Pashandis. Sangha means to wind them up. My avatar, he says in one verse, is to... Also it's said about Lord Nityananda that he has Duikaj, two things he's doing. Besides Krishna Prema, he is Pashandi Dolan. It means he's smashing the Pashandis. We shouldn't really kind of neglect that aspect. Obviously, we're not going to be neglecting because it's put forward. After all, we're after Krishna Prema, but to get to the Krishna Prema part, then the Pashandi aspect, whether it's within us or not, just has to be dealt with. So, Pashandi Kutarkika, various types of atheists and are mentioned throughout Chaitanya Charitamrita. Those false logicians, but they generally, and the students who are fallen, Paduya Adam, they fall into this general category of Pashandi. Pashandi can be, an interestingly funny story in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Part of it is funny, but when Mahaprabhu came with so many kirtaniyas to the Kazi's house, and the Kazi, the Brahmanas, they were complaining that there's Nimai Pandit, he used to be a good guy, a good boy, he was a big Pandit, everyone respected him. Now he's taking up this chanting, he's rolling on the ground. We don't know where he's getting this, he's waking up. He's telling the Muslim magistrate, and the Muslim king was also a big, much worse demon. But so telling him that these people are simply chanting, they're waking up the Pashandis. Can you imagine? The Smartas and Jati Goshai Brahmanas, they were considering Nimai Pandit, they were calling him a Pashandi, although they were Pashandi. So this is going on in the material world that is described in Bhagavad Gita, Adharma, Madharma. They cannot see what is Dharma, what is not Dharma. So practically anyone can fall into these categories, as mentioned here. Jai Mudha Kohe, Jeev Ishvara Hoy Sham. That the Jiva and Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Redeshi Arjuna Tishtati, Brahmayan Sarvabhutan. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, he said, within the heart, Evam Sachitte Sata Eva Siddha. He's perfect in the heart. The yogis are meditating there on Krishna in the heart. Dhanavastita Tadgitena Manasa Pasanti and Yogina. And that in the heart, Ishvara Yasyantam Navadu Sura Surgana Tasmai Divaya Namaha. No one can understand whether he's a Sura or an Asura, even the devotees. They cannot understand his end. There's limit. There's no limit. He's within the heart of all living entities. So those who worship the Devas are also, Prabhupada gives a reference to Ishopanishad, Yetu Sambritam Tama. Those in Tamagun, they worship the Absolute, and those who worship the Devas, or any material entity, Yayu Vidyam Sambritam Ashnut, they also attain lower regions of hell by Yamaraja's grace. And Yamaraj is given nice opportunity, as Vidura. Anytime we read the instructions of Vidura, he's giving his instructions, especially to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is a bodily concept of life, always identifying with, because we're reading a section about Yudhishthira, and soon it's coming. Vidura, Yudhishthira, Vidura is going on pilgrimage and instructing Dhritarashtra. He is very happy to take this position. Yamaraj was cursed by Bandak Muni to take this position as Yamaraj and to instruct in this material world. So Yamaraj is giving instruction. Even he is cited by Hiranyakashipu. That Hiranyakashipu, after his brother was killed, there was great lamentation. His mother was lamenting, everybody was lamenting. somehow or other, Hiranyakashipu had great respect for Vedic knowledge, and especially he invoked Yamaraj because he gave the example of one king, Suyagya, and that king was very much a great Kshatriya, but he had so many wives and relatives. So when he went into the battle one day, dressed very beautifully with his armor and beautiful Kshatriyas, especially the king, he would be dressed very nicely. He was very determined king, and this is all being given by the story by Yamaraj. Yamaraj came into the assembly because he wanted to relieve these family members of Suyagya from the bodily attachment. So Yamaraj is giving wonderful instructions. He's not simply there punishing. It's true, he's punishing, but he's also giving wonderful. Dharmam tu Bhagavat Panitam, Sakshat Bhagavat Panitam. So anyway, this story goes on that the Suyagya, when he was in the battle, he was very determined. He bit his lip, and he died with his lip, his teeth biting his lip, and he was lying on the battlefield, all bloody and dirty, and arrows piercing him. Beautiful armor, but he was a dead body. But the queens, they would not give up their attachment. They were wailing and crying, tears rolling down. Like that. Oh, king, king. So, because a little boy is never denied entrance, Yamaraj, because if you're attached, this is why throughout India, whoever it is, but the Vedic understanding is someone is attached as these women these queens, they were keeping that King Suyagya in the material. He couldn't go on to his next body. So Yamaraj, knowing that, he appears as a little boy. And he said, you queens, you're supposed to be superior persons, older ladies. And why you're crying like this? Don't you know? And he gave them so many instructions. As he's Yamaraj, but he's a little boy. Just like four Kumaras, they're never denied anywhere. They went all the way to Vaikuntha. So this little Yamaraj, little boy, can you imagine a little boy about 5, 6, 7, and he's giving these instructions to these queens. Because he wants to help them give up their attachment. So in this way he was preaching how you can go on crying 100 years and still the king will not come. You've wasted your whole life and he will not come back. Then he gave a nice story about, so we're getting a story within a story within a story. The Bhagavatam is amazing. You get Sukadev, and he's referring to Narada Muni, more or less. Narada Muni is giving the story of Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu is giving the story of Suyagya. Suyagya is giving another story of these Kulinga birds. And one female wife, Kulinga bird, how she was in the forest and there was some hunter. He was setting a trap. He caught that female bird. And then the husband, that other man, Kulinga bird. Birds are also very attached to each other. They have families. He was so upset, he said, how can I live now that my wife is gone? I have no sense. I may as well die also and die. As he was thinking like that, and his children, what am I going to do? I have little birds that haven't gotten wings yet. And my wife is now caught by the hunter. Boom! Hunter shot him. He was finished. So this Yamaraj is giving us great instructions for detachment. He's not simply punishing. In fact, he says in 6th canto, practically you get so many instructions. When Yamadutas were being baffled, they went to the court of Yamaraj and said, what's going on? We got this guy, Jamil. He was such a demon. He seemed like such a sinful guy. He was just so sinful. And we went to grab him, and all these 4 wonderful persons came and they defeated us. So now we've come to you, because all he did was chant Narayan. Yada Narayana Yeti Jagad Chaturakshara. These 4 syllables. And Mriyamano, at the time of this, Mriyamano Harinama, Putro Pacharitam. He was simply calling for his son, and he was taken from us, and we were defeated in arguments. So we really want to know. So when Yamaraj heard that word, the sound of Narayan, the Lord's name, he was very enlivened. Because generally he's dealing with all this sinful persons, but when he has a chance to hear this name, Narayan, he was very enlivened. So there he gave very nice instructions to the Sorapujitani Vishnu. He said, these servants of Vishnu, Parigita Deva, even the demigods sing their glories. They're none different from Vishnu. They're worshipable by everybody. So when you have a chance to get association of such persons, you should be very ecstatic. Don't ever bring me such persons. They're not fit. You cannot take them. Even in dreams, they don't see Yamaraj. Swapnepi, even in dream. Rather, you bring to me those persons who are averse to drinking the honey of the nectar of the glories of the personality of Godhead. Not the Paramahansas especially. Paramahansa Karara Sangai, Niskincha, who are Niskinchana persons detached from this material world. So the Prasandis have so many of these qualities, atheist class. Some of them, they worship demigods, they consider themselves bhaktas. So this verse is a very strong verse. It's given in many places, this verse, although there's no purport here, but throughout you can read in the books, you'll see so many explanations. And it's used in so many ways. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahmarudradi. Even thinking like that the demigods who are very great, they're not, according to Prabodhananda Saraswati, he's telling us that from his vision, these demigods simply like insects. They're nothing. Of course, we don't offend the demigods, but Prabodhananda Saraswati, he's in a position like that. They're not very important. Simply, he says, Karunika taksha vaibhavatam tam gorams evastama. We want to get the sidelong glance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and take to this Hari Nam. Because this is the instruction of Yamaraj also, that he says, Tasmat Sankirtanam Vishnu Jagan Mangalam, the most auspicious thing in the world. He's giving this instruction. And Tasmat Sankirtanam, and Bhagavatam, he says, Tannama Grahanadi Bi, Tannama Grahanadi Bi, Bhakti Yogo Bhagavati Tannama Grahanadi. He's telling Yamadudis, he's telling everyone, you have to take to this Bhakti Yoga, beginning with Tannama Grahanadi Bi. Because this holy name, it delivers one from all sin. There's one verse in the Rupa Goswami gives us in his collection of verses, Padyavali, Vepante Duritani Moha Mahima. He says, Vepanti Duritani. Actually, Duritani, the sins, they tremble, sinful activities, they tremble in fear when they hear the holy name, Vepanti, Duritani, Moha. The glories of the material energy, those glories faint away, they disappear. Mahima, Moha Mahima. There's glories of the Moha, illusion. Everyone is glorifying. Pishachi Pali Enamati Chanahoy. Everyone is speaking like a madman that I am so and so, and I am this person, that person, like that. In this material world. Upadi. So they're all speaking some nonsense. So then again, the Padyavali says, it's a verse by Lakshmi Dara. That's Rupa Goswami's, one of his favorite verses. Padyavali, the collection of wonderful verses by Rupa Goswami. Vipanti Duritani Sananda Madhuparka Sambriti Vido Karot Ujamam. So even Lord Brahma himself, he prepares Madhuparka, that's honey and water, to worship the lotus feet of such a person who chants. Satankam Nakaranjanin Kalayati Shi Chitragupta Kuti. Chitragupta is the person who he's the scribe that writes down and helps Yamaraj continually. And he stares at the effulgence from the toes of such devotees that chant the holy name. He's in awe. So they don't act, they don't punish such persons. In fact, they're in ecstasy when they see such devotees. Shakankam nakaranjani. Nakaranjani means the toenails. Kalayateshi Chitragupta. So therefore it says, Vaktum nami taveshvara bilasate atak param. What is there? What more can be said about the glories of the holy name? So many verses glorifying, but the holy name is what's being put forward in the sixth canto, where Yamaraj is commenting it and giving instructions. Dharmam tu bhagavat panitam. No ekadapi. He describes that those persons who one time, not even one time, bow their head. Na smarati. One time don't remember Krishna within the heart. Those persons who one time don't speak the holy name, think of Krishna's lotus feet. Those persons, anayadvam krita vishnu krityam. You can bring to me, Tom, anayadvam, not the devotees. So how important is it that Yamaraj is giving this instruction? And he says those persons, naprabha, vayu, the eternal time factor, the time factor itself has no power. I myself, the time factor, the devas, the material energy have no power to do anything, to punish. Nadandam, he says, they cannot punish such persons. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was chastising the, what was his name, that Pandit, who was speaking Bhagavatam, Dhananjaya Pandit. And he had offended Srivas Thakur, so it happened even before Lord Chaitanya's appearance. Devananda Pandit, sorry. Devananda Pandit. So one time Mahaprabhu was walking in Kuliagram, and he heard that Devananda Pandit, it was a great Pandit, and even celibate from birth, he practically faultless, but he liked Bhagavatam, but he didn't understand the purport of Bhagavatam. At one time, his students, while he was speaking, this happened years before Lord Chaitanya, this incident, but they had dragged Srivas Pandit. Srivas Pandit, hearing Bhagavatam, was in ecstasy, crying, exhibiting 8 symptoms of Sattvika Bhava. But they had no idea of it. They're simply hearing the Bhagavatam is nice, something, you know. So they're also considered pasandi. So Mahaprabhu was walking by one day, heard him speaking. And he said, "Oh, Pandit, how is it that you did this to Srivas Pandit, a great devotee? You claim to be such a big Pandit. You don't understand the purport of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because I can see what you did. I know what you did to Srivas Pandit." But he felt very humbled in front of Chaitanya. Later on, he became a follower of Bhakti Pandit, so he was completely delivered. But Devananda Pandit, at that time, Mahaprabhu told him that you should understand you can be punished by Yamaraj. One who doesn't fear Yamaraj by speaking Bhagavatam without knowing the purport, offending Srivas Pandit, he will be punished by Yamaraj. So he got the idea that he became very afraid. Otherwise, one who takes the chastisement, this is what Vrindavan Das Thakur says, one who takes that punishment, danda, of Mahaprabhu, Vaikuntha Loke Jai, he will go to Vaikuntha. So Yamaraj is such one of the 12 Mahajans. So he's speaking, glorifying the holy name. And we should follow in his footsteps. Or follow in his instructions. So Brahma, Shiva, young Brahma, Varunendra, Rudra, Maruta, Stundanti, Divyaistavai, Vedai Sangha Parakrama Panishadayantiyam Samaya. One who reads the Bhagavatam, how could he fail to notice it? Even in the end of the Bhagavatam, it says, young Brahma, Varuna, Indra, all these great devas, they glorify Krishna. Yashyantam Navadu Suraga. They don't understand the limit of the mercy of Krishna, the glories of Krishna. Brahma, Varuna, Indra, Maruts, young Brahma, Varuna, Rudra, Marutastan, Banti Devais, Devai, Vedai, Sangha, Panakrama. All the Vedas, headed by Upanishads, they're glorifying Krishna. And all the yogi, Dhyana Vastita Tadgitena Mansa Pasantim Yogi Nasyam. Prabhupada used to quote this line. Dhyana Vastita Tad. You're studying yoga, you're professing to be yogi, then you should understand. But otherwise, if you go in India, you see so many demigods are still being worshipped. Dhanam Dehi, they're asking, what does Krishna say in Gita, so many verses? They worship the devas to get fruitive results very quickly. Kamam, what is that verse? Full of material desires. Kama, they rise high, Farga to Farga, they come down again. So the devas are, sometimes it is said that one who worships devas instead of Krishna is like worshipping a witch and giving up the worship of his own mother. What is it? What was it? Kama is taishta hrita jnana. This is hrita jnana, means the heart is hrita jnana, that the consciousness in the heart is not right, hrita jnana. Antavatu palamtesham tadbhavita alpamesham. Krishna is certifying antavat. The fruits of worshipping devas is very limited. Antavatu palamtesham tadbhavita alpamesham. And further he says, alpamesham. Alpamesham means your brain is alpa, small. If you worship devas, you have a chance to worship Krishna, but you're worshiping devas. And just see what happened to that Gopal Chapala. You can read in the Adi Leela 17 that Gopal Chapala was the best of the Pashandis. He was such a fool, and Shivas Pandit was such a great, pure devotee, part of the Panchatattva. He decided, very loudmouth, harsh person also. Even amongst the atheists, he was like even worse than most of them. So he had this stupid idea that he would, he was some kind of Brahmin rascal. He put the paraphernalia for worshipping Chandi Kali on the doorstep of Shivas Pandit, as though that would do anything to. But he had a pretty bad result. He put the vermilion and he put some turmeric, like a reddish turmeric with some red flour, maybe some rice. They have these plates, you see Hindus, they're always worshipping some deva and they have something like that. Put a string on your wrist, and they have ways of doing quick puja. They're doing for antavatu palamtesha. So in the morning when Shivas Pandit came out, he saw the paraphernalia and he brought some gentlemen, some Brahmins there. He said, just see, you guys don't know, but I've been worshipping secretly. How is it secret? It's on his doorstep, but this plate. So those Brahmins, they were very intelligent. They said, oh, this is nonsense. And what happened to this poor Gopal Chapala? Within 3 days, he was suffering from leprosy. He got instant karma. It was his blood, and he was completely isolated. Nowadays, everybody's isolated, so it doesn't. He was very isolated because leprosy is a very bad disease. Nobody wants to see you there. Sometimes if you go in, I saw in lepers on the bridge, Lakshman Jula Bridge in Rishikesh, and there's lepers in different cities. And they're very bad that you walk by and people are throwing some paisa there, some money to help them. Nowadays there's probably some cure, sort of kushta. this disease. So he was down by the Ganga, isolated by himself, and one time he chanced that Mahaprabhu came by. He said, "Oh, please, please, you are the savior of the fallen." He had this great epiphany that he heard this, "You're supposed to be Gaur-Hari, savior of the fallen. Look at me, I'm suffering so much, you please." So the only instruction, Mahaprabhu, first he said, "Yes, you're suffering now, but you will suffer millions of times lives like this because you have offended Srivas Thakur. Your only hope is to go to Srivas Thakur." So he did that and was relieved. So Srivas Thakur is not such an innocent, pure devotee, but those who offend him, they get bad results. So the Prashandis are like that. They're seeing that the Devas, they don't see any reason why to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. So Yamaraj himself, it is said about him, Britya Parade Dande, that if the servants, like these Yamadutas, if they're misled and they would take a Vaishnava, a pure devotee, even a Jamil, they represent the Guru. So also as servants of Prabhupada or our Guru, then we have to be pure representatives. We cannot be showing any black ink, as it says. What does that say? Moshi Bindu, a black spot. Shukla Bhashti Moshi Bindu, Joichi Nalukai. Said about the Sanyasya Rapachidra Sarvaloka guy. Those who are representing the acharyas in our line, if they show any, because we're putting ourselves forward as great, we're sadhus, we've come to deliver you. So many times it's been seen that, just like Prabhupada said about some devotees he said that about the LA temple really. He said, one time he said, "We'll be the laughing stock. If the men are abandoning the women, and there's so many children, they become like Arjuna describes Varnashankara, then we will be the laughing stock." The Prabhupada was always very wary to keep up the standard. That's why it's so important to read these books and beat our minds by reading these books, the Shastra. Prabhupada said, "I've given these books. You must chant and read our books, not simply go out. That's okay. It's wonderful to go out and preach." And even nowadays, some people are still going out. Brigopati was saying in LA is very restrictive. You're supposed to be not going out and preaching for sure. They don't, but they're going out and putting books on people's doorknobs in front of their door. Maybe they knock on the door, then they stand back, and someone may come and then they say a few words to them like that. Although there's devotees in Atlanta, maybe the rules are not so strict in Atlanta, but they're going to the airport and they did like 1,700 books or something in one day. I mean, amazing. But depending on the time and circumstance, Prabhupada was always wary. Not that I remember being in LA Temple in '70, and the devotees had gone to India with Prabhupada, and Karanda was very attentive in those days, that he was in touch with the standards, how to keep up the standard. We want to avoid being punished by Yamaraj. So like as soon as he heard from Tamal Krishna by letter, in those days letter, we weren't just even phoning up, how the Prabhupada's godbrothers, what they were saying and what the other brahmanas were saying. So immediately Karanda was very conscious. He had instituted of course we knew you eat with your right hand like that, but there's no question of left hand, something like that. But the transfer pots, all these standards were coming to us. Then when I went to New York Temple, they didn't have transfer pot. So I was very shocked that everyone was still eating out of the cooking pot. Cooking pot would come into the prasad room, the men's prasadam room, brahmachari, whatever they were, and serve out. That's very nice, wax paper. And then when there was anything left, the server would put his hand in the pot and scoop it out and just lick it. So I was still a new bhakta. I said, this is not good, Bhavananda said, This is not the International Society of Rules and Regulations. He didn't want to hear anything. But it's funny. So later he went to India. I'm sure he found out. But so Prabhupada wanted to keep a very high Brahminical standard. Not that we go and suddenly we have lechas and yavanas fit to be punished by Yamaraj. Simply that we're chanting for 1 year or 5 months or a day, then we think we can chastise senior persons who are following at least some strict regulations. So as representatives, as Yamaraj felt that he was should be punished himself because the Yamadutas had falsely tried to take Ajamil, although Ajamil had been quite a bad guy, he was lamenting himself that I was keeping one prostitute for a wife, and I was stealing just to maintain, stealing and drinking, every principle he was breaking. Who knows what he was doing? So Prabhupada said we should always be conscious and not become Pashandi. So Pashandi is also shown by Lord Indra. He showed the example of Pashandi in the 4th canto when he was stealing the horse out of envy, because Pashandi means also envious. Prithu Maharaj was going to do 100 horse sacrifices. So Indra was so impelled by anger, envy, that he dressed like a bogus sannyasi. And he stole a horse once, twice, I don't know if it was even 3 times. The horse was, again, taken. Finally, Vishnu appeared. When he appeared, he said, he said to Prithu Maharaj that, let Indra have his 100 sacrifices. It's not any big deal. So, but Koti Ashrameda, if one does even hundreds of millions of Ashrameda sacrifices, it is not equal to one chanting, Ek Krishna Nam. And if somebody thinks it is, he's also considered Pashandi, and he's fit to be punished by Yamaraj. Go koti dhanam grahane kagasya. If one goes to the banks of the Ganga, the Triveni, and he there gives, he does all kinds of sacrifices, or he gives cows away, millions of cows in charity during the full moon, and what is it, time, or it is not equal to 100 tiny fragmental part of chanting the holy name, just one time. Akristi kritacheta sam samanasam uchataram changasam. The holy name is the most attractive feature in this material world for all saintly persons. So when we're not attracted to the holy name, then we can understand we're not acting like saintly. We should think of these verses. Kritacheta sam samanasam cha. It delivers one from all sins. Amukha loka sulabha. Except if one is mute, he has some excuse for not chanting. This is what it says in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then it also, it says, Mukha loka sulabho, muktu vasasha mukti shriya. We're after mukti, it said that this holy name controls mukti. The opulence of mukti is controlled by the holy name. Tanama grahanadi bi. So this bhakti yoga is given by Yamaraj, by the Mahajaniya Kata Sapanta. We have to follow them. And he's Nasiddha Mukya, none of the siddhas or what to speak of the asuras, none of these persons, Gandharvas, they cannot understand it. Even the great Yajnavalkya, great sages, Jadikita, Matir, their minds are attracted by the flowery words in the Vedas. They're busy doing yajnas and so many things, rituals. But even a tiny, so-called small devotee, humble, if he simply chants and understands Chanadapi, Sanichena, Torapi, Sahishna, Mani Namani Dena, that he's smaller than the straw in the street, more insignificant, and he has full faith, Chaitra Darpana Marjan and Bhava Mahadevagni. He can be finished of this Bhava Mahadevagni Nirvapanam. Abashopi kshapyati. Danta. The heaps of sinful activities are destroyed by this. Namaikam, one chanting of the holy name. Eko harinam jato papare papayo jato papuri barinare. Aparada, all the aparada, nama aparada, yuktanam, namane avashant. There's one avashanti. The surefire method for counteracting all nama aparada is to chant the holy name. Although we may be performing the aparad, but it is by chanting, but still the only relief is the chanting. Namanyeva harant yagam aganirhanaya pumsam etavatalam sankirtanam santirtkanai kapitaro kamalaya taksho. So Mahaprabhu is the Sankirtanai kapitaro, the father of this Hare Krishna movement. His name, even he, Nija Nama Koridan, he gives his own name, he chants his own name. When he's chanting Hare Krishna, who is he chanting? He's chanting his own holy name. So here in this whole section about the aparads, and the pashandis is simply to bring us out of this atheist mentality and bring us out of our mudha mentality. Avajananti ma mudha manashintanamashita parambhavama jananto. The mudho nanupashyante. The mudas cannot see. They're simply working very hard in this material world. Kutumba bharanenava, for their family life, for their household life. Kutumba bharan. Diva chata hiyarajan, day and night. Sharira, just for the body. So many aspects of mudha, so many aspects of pashandi. I'm sure I can fit in any of that. And so our only deliverance is to chant the holy name and hear these pastimes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his instructions. All right, so any comments, please? No.
There is. There are. Just a second. I have to put precaution.
I was going to ask, like when the queens, they're crying, and you mentioned that Dhritarashtra, he couldn't leave because of their emotion. He was.
The king Suyagya?
Yeah.
That's different. It's not
So,
Dhritarashtra.
so their emotion and his attachment kept him in the body. Is that what was happening?
That's what Prabhupada says in the purport, that Yamraj, he's a little boy. Somehow Hiranyakashipu knew all this thing. Don't ask me how. Isn't the Bhagavatam? And
Second chapter.
yeah, 7-2. And he knew that if they're attached, he will have to remain in as a ghost. He will not be able to go to his next body.
So he would leave his body, but he'd still have to be a ghost.
He left his body, but he's hovering. Therefore, Yamaraj knows it. Therefore, he appears as this little boy.
So I guess that's why at the time of death, oftentimes they say that you should speak and give that person permission to leave. You know, that say everything's okay, we're going to take care of, you know, if there's children or whatever.
Well, yeah, they do that. I mean, the karmis do that too.
Right.
Yeah, they have some idea about it, but they don't give the right prescription. They don't chant. But they may say that, but it might help that person. Yeah.
And then I was going to ask about the chanting the holy name, because we've been reading some passages that emphasize you have to have intention, or if you chant mechanically, then it's not.
Sanketam parihashamba, that's another verse for Ajamil. Even if you chant neglectfully, or as just like Ajamil did, Sankirtan means that he was thinking of something else, his son. Sankirtan, Parihasam as a joke, Stobam as music, Helanam, just neglectfully, Madhuram, Madhuram, Helanam. It's still the most sweet thing in the material, in the universe is, and it can deliver. Briguvara Nara Matram, Tariyat Krishna Nama. Even if it's broken or unconscious or however you say. Of course, there's always, that's called abas, there's nam abas, it's not totally pure, but Ajamil did it in a way he was completely helpless. So that example is given.
Even like Mrigari, right? He was chanting Mara.
No, that's Valmiki.
That was who?
Valmiki was chanting Mara, 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 Mara. And then it became Rama, 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 Rama.
Yeah. I mean, because that's totally, but still it had so much benefit.
You were reading something about their extreme, I forgot, what was the conclusion? I was getting out of the car when I heard it.
That's mechanical chanting will relieve you from the material suffering. I'm paraphrasing Prabhupada's word, but will not give you love of God.
Yes. Therefore, it may take
Madhya.
more than one time. Ajamil got, he was because you were talking about extreme example, but that's an kind of extreme example.
But then he went to
Hardwar. But still, he was thinking, I saw these beautiful, and he became totally pure. And then the airplane came for him, the Vaikuntha airplane.
You were mentioning earlier in the class the different kind of pashandis, and in the purport Prabhupada mentioned about Datta, Jiva Goswami saying
Dattatreya, but I don't know if that's an incarnation of Dattatreya. It is. They worship Dattatreya, of course. He was prayed for by Atri Muni. He wanted a son that would be like God, but he didn't know what was God. So Dattatreya appeared, Soma, and Durvasa. So Dattatreya represents Krishna, right? Or he's the mode of goodness, not Krishna. But still, and Soma represents Vishnu. Oh, he's Vishnu. Dattatreya represents Brahma and Durvasa, Shiva. So he got these three sons, and they represent this devas. So Dattatreya represents Brahma. So, but if one worships Soma, he represents still Vishnu, but one doesn't just worship Soma, he's still worshiping a demigod. You're still a Pasandi. You might be better Prashandi or worse Prashandis. There's all degrees apparently, and all varieties and categories. Generally speaking, someone who doesn't accept Krishna completely, he's Prashandi. Dharmavrata Hutadi, that one offense, what number is that? He takes the chanting to be just as a vrata, vows, or a ritual, vrata hutadi, samam aparad, that's considered, if he equalizes all these material things, they're considered equal, that's one of the offenses. I forgot the number, 8. Number 8.
I was just wondering that, are there scriptures of the Pashandis that minimize chanting the holy name?
I don't know if they have it. Prabhupada says, strictly we avoid the literature of the Prashandi. We don't study the Mayavadis. Mayavadi is such shastram. Even he specifically said, even if we think we're studying it just to understand what they're saying and we want to argue, because actually it's given, just like there's extensive purport, like 15-page purports in Chaitanya Charitamrita that explain what is Shankaracharya's philosophy. So we don't have to go and take it up and take a PhD in Mayavad Shastra, because it's there, but
Actually, where Prabhupada writes in the CC about whole description of Mayavadi philosophy and everything.
yeah, it's
like
there.
So confusing when you read it. You wonder, is this our philosophy Prabhupada is talking about? It's like so bewildering actually to read that. Prabhupada writes this a couple of the purposes.
Well, there's that verse quoted, Vyamoha characharasya, how there's so many shastras and they're saying, Samya shastra vivadaya, Mahaprabhu's mercy is that he takes all these so-called bewildering shastras and he just connects all the dots very easily. Shamya shastra vivadaya samadaya madhurya maryadaya Shri Chaitanya Dayanide. The ocean of the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is such by just taking that Krishna Chaitanya Doya Karahavicha, studying that Chaitanya Trimita, Chaitanya Bhagavat. In fact, Kaviraj Goswami says, Ore, Shuno, Mudha, Lo, Pasande, Yavan. You're all Pasande Yavana. You have to, if you don't study the Chaitanya Bhagavat, you will be punished severely. So.
Krishna. We're scared now.
I think that's the whole idea. It's scary, but it's nectar scary. Sankirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaitak show. But even one time, on the other hand, Eko Harinam Jato. Namaikam Yasavachi Smarana Patagatam Shotamalam Gatam Ba. How does that verse go? Oh, where? Okay.
Hare Krishna. The story that you told about the devotees eating or kind of taking directly from the pot, and then you spoke up, but the response was unfavorable.
Well, in the beginning, because I was a new bhakta, but later I think that all the temples, but LA temple was the first one because somehow Karanda was very conscientious, and he was always, and I don't think he was on the phone with Tamal Krishna, but by letter or something. Maybe he was, I don't know, in those days. It was unlikely, but, he was very conscious in those days. And he was bringing up the standard. And when Prabhupada came to LA, he had already made that the standard for the whole ISKCON. So Karanda had that feeling, and therefore he was always hearing what was going on in India, and not always, but he kept in tune with it. So New York, in those days, New York, you might as well be on another planet if you're in New York and you're in LA. People weren't just like, hey, what's going on in LA? You take out your phone, you see the kirtan going on, and clap. No. So things move slow, information moves slow.
Okay, thank you. But my question was, what do you do in general when that happens and the response is unfavorable? Should you just worry about yourself trying to do the right thing?
Oh, you're saying if that happens at any time?
Yes.
Well, I mean, fortunately, that particular thing, we're over that. We don't lick the pot. I mean, if we're licking the pot here, bringing it out from the kitchen, even the Indian from Lake City, they'll think, oh, these guys are still mlecha, But they don't think that. But if Prabhupada had two, not conflicting, but two tracks. I know that some devotees were complaining about the leader in England, and Bhajahari told the pastime that he and a few others were concerned about one sannyasi, or I think a sannyasi in England, and they went to Prabhupada to complain. And Prabhupada said, why you don't complain? It is not your business, So it depends on what the complaint is about, how big the infraction is, and we had an instance in New York, big instance, and Prabhupada said devotees were innocent, but those who were senior persons, and he mentioned the name, I heard him, they are such fools that they put up with that. So who's doing it, who's saying it, what the thing is, all these things. Prabhupada said you should be intelligent, so Prabhupada was super intelligent, so not everybody's like that. Okay, that's it.
Very nice.
Hare Krishna.